The stars looked cold from the bridge of the Defiance. Admiral stood alone near the main viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. He had served in space for 32 years. He had seen wonders that would make poets weep, but tonight he felt only anger. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in silence. They all knew what was coming. The message from the Galactic Hegemony had arrived 3 hours ago, and since then, no one had spoken more than necessary. Lieutenant approached him carefully. She was young, only 28, but she had proven herself many times, trusted her more than most. "Admiral," she said softly, "Earth Command is waiting for your response." Did not turn around. Read me the Hegemony's decree again. Hesitated, then lifted her data tablet. Her voice was flat as she read. By order of the Galactic Assembly, all vessels registered to the species known as humans shall be impounded immediately. All human colonies shall be placed under protective supervision. All humans currently serving in non-human territories shall report to designated holding facilities. This action is taken for the safety and stability of the galactic community. Protective supervision, repeated. The words tasted like poison. They mean prison. Yes, sir. He finally turned to face her. His eyes were dark and tired, but there was fire in them. 300 years, Lieutenant. That is how long we have been part of their galaxy. 300 years of following their rules, accepting their insults, and proving ourselves over and over again. And this is what we receive in return. Nodded slowly. She had grown up hearing stories from her grandmother about the early days of contact. The aliens had arrived when humanity was just beginning to explore beyond their solar system. They had looked at Earth and called it a death world, a planet too dangerous, too violent, too extreme for proper civilized life. The hegemony was made up of species that had evolved on gentle worlds, planets with low gravity, mild weather, and few predators. To them, Earth was a nightmare, a place where the very air could kill, where the water hid monsters, where the ground shook and mountains spat fire. And the creatures that had evolved there, humans, were considered barely more than animals. Strong, yes, tough, certainly, but savage, unpredictable, dangerous. For 3 centuries, humanity had worked to change this view. They had been patient. They had been diplomatic. They had accepted the lowest jobs, hauling cargo, mining asteroids, building stations in places too hazardous for other species. They had smiled when alien officials called them primitive. They had bowed when hegemony soldiers treated them like servants. And now this, a decree to impound their ships and lock their people in camps, because the hegemony had finally realized something that made them afraid. Humans were not just surviving, they were growing. "Sir," said quietly, "Station 12 has reported that hegemony forces have surrounded them. They are demanding that our people surrender their weapons and submit to inspection." Closed his eyes. Station 12 was a mining outpost near the edge of human space. 3,000 people lived there, families, children. What is their status? Commander O'Meara is negotiating, but the hegemony commander has given them only 6 hours to comply. And if they refuse? Did not answer, she did not need to. Walked slowly to the center of the bridge. Around him, his officers watched and waited. They were all humans, all children of Earth, that dangerous world that the galaxy feared and despised. "Open a channel to Earth Command," he said. The main screen flickered, and the face of Fleet Admiral Bay appeared. She was older than, her hair gray and her face lined with decades of service, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Admiral," she said, "I assume you have read the decree." "I have." "And you know what Earth Command has decided?" Nodded slowly, "I do." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. 2 officers who had spent their entire lives preparing for a moment they had hoped would never come. "The order is given," said finally. "All human forces are to activate Protocol Omega. We are no longer members of the galactic hegemony." A soft murmur ran through the bridge. Protocol Omega. The secret plan that had been developed over 100 years ago, passed down from one generation of military leaders to the next. The plan for the day when diplomacy failed completely. "What about Station 12?" asked. His expression hardened. "A rescue fleet is already being assembled. You will lead it personally, Admiral. Get our people out of there. And if the hegemony resists, then show them why they should have treated us with respect." The channel closed, stood motionless for several seconds, processing what had just happened. Then he turned to face his crew. "You all heard the order," he said. His voice was calm but carried across the entire bridge. "For 300 years we have been the galaxy's laborers, their servants, their joke. That ends today." He walked to his command chair and sat down. "Lieutenant, signal the fleet. All ships are to form up and prepare for faster-than-light jump to Station 12. "Yes, Admiral." His fingers moved quickly across her console. "Fleet is responding. All 1,200 vessels are ready to move on your command." 1,200 ships. Not the largest fleet in the galaxy, but every single one was crewed by humans. People who had been born on a world that tried to kill them every day of their lives. People who had survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. People who had looked up at the stars and refused to be afraid. "Admiral," called out Ensign Park from the sensors station. "Long-range scans show the hegemony fleet at Station 12 consists of approximately 300 vessels." 300, repeated. "They thought that would be enough to frighten us." He leaned back in his chair and looked out at the stars once more. Somewhere out there, 3,000 human civilians were being threatened by a force that considered them lesser beings, animals to be controlled. "All ships," he said quietly, "jump." The stars stretched into lines of light as the human fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel. And across the galaxy, a message began to spread from species to species, station to station. The humans were moving, and they did not look peaceful anymore. The hegemony fleet commander was named. He was a tall, thin creature with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved constantly when he spoke. His species, were considered among the most intelligent in the galaxy. They had ruled the hegemony's military council for over 2,000 years. Was not worried about the humans. He stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Light, watching Station 12 on the main display. The human mining outpost was ugly, all sharp angles and exposed metal, built for function rather than beauty. It was exactly what he expected from a primitive species. "How much time remains?" he asked his second officer. 2 hours, Commander. Then our soldiers will board the station and begin processing the population." Nodded with satisfaction. Processing. Such a clean word for what would happen. The humans would be separated, workers in one group, soldiers in another. The useful ones would be sent to labor camps. The dangerous ones would be eliminated. It was necessary. They had seen the reports. Human population was growing too fast. Human technology was advancing too quickly. Human ships were appearing in places they should not be. If the hegemony did not act now, the death might become a real threat. "Commander," his communications officer spoke suddenly, "we are receiving multiple faster-than-light signatures. Something is approaching." "How many ships?" "Scanning now." The officer paused. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion. "Commander, I am reading over 1,000 vessels." Felt the first small twist of concern. 1,000, what species? They are human, Commander." The display changed. Where there had been empty space moments ago, there was now a fleet. Ship after ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, forming up in perfect lines. They were not the clumsy cargo haulers that the hegemony usually saw. These were warships, angular, armored, bristling with weapons. At the center of the formation was a massive vessel, with the name Defiance written on its hull. "This is Admiral of the Human Defense Force." The voice came through on all channels, calm and clear. "You are surrounding a civilian station that belongs to humanity. You will withdraw your forces immediately, or we will remove them." His pale skin flushed with anger. "Remove them." This human dared to threaten the hegemony. "Human vessel," he responded. "You are in violation of Galactic Assembly Decree 774. Your fleet is ordered to stand down and submit to inspection. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." There was a pause. Then the human admiral spoke again. "You have been given your warning. What happens next is your choice." Turn to his weapons officer. "Target the lead vessel. Show these animals what happens when they challenge their betters." The eternal light fired. A brilliant beam of energy shot across space toward the Defiance. It should have struck the human ship dead center. It should have torn through the primitive hull like paper. Instead, the Defiance moved. Not slowly, not carefully. It simply was not there when the beam arrived. And before it could even process what had happened, the human fleet attacked. Commander Bay led the first assault wing. She had been a pilot for 23 years, but she had never been allowed to fly in actual combat. Humans were too valuable as workers to waste in battle, the hegemony had said. They should leave the fighting to proper civilized species. Now she smiled as her fighter dove toward the enemy fleet. "All pilots weapons free," she announced. "Remember your training, they don't know how to fight predators." It was true. The hegemony's military tactics had been developed over thousands of years of fighting species like themselves, careful, calculating, predictable. They signaled their attacks in advance. They followed ancient rules of engagement. They expected their enemies to behave the same way. Humans did not. His fighter twisted through a pattern that no alien pilot would attempt, too fast, too aggressive, too likely to cause the pilot to lose consciousness from the force. But humans had evolved on a high-gravity world. Their bodies were stronger, their reactions faster, their tolerance for pain far beyond anything the hegemony had ever encountered. She fired once, twice, 3 times. 3 hegemony fighters exploded. Around her, the rest of the human pilots were doing the same. They moved like a pack of wolves among sheep, striking from unexpected angles, adapting instantly to changing conditions. The hegemony's defensive formations, so carefully arranged, fell apart in minutes. On the Defiance, Admiral watched the battle with a strange mix of emotions: pride at what his people were accomplishing, sadness at what they had been forced to become. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant, "the enemy flagship is attempting to retreat. Can we intercept?" "Yes, sir. Captain Hand's boarding team is ready." Hesitated for only a moment. "Launch them." The boarding shuttle was small and fast, designed to attach itself to enemy vessels before they could react. Inside, Sergeant Major Han and his team of 12 soldiers waited in silence. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that the hegemony had never seen: projectile guns, blade weapons, explosives. Primitive by galactic standards, but devastatingly effective. The shuttle hit the eternal light with a hard clang. Cutting tools activated, burning through the alien hull in seconds. Then and his team were inside. The soldiers they encountered had never experienced close combat. Their species had abandoned such barbaric practices thousands of years ago. They fired their energy weapons with careful precision, just as they had been trained. His team did not bother with precision. They moved through the corridors like a storm, shooting, striking, overwhelming. They fell back, then fled, then surrendered in growing numbers. Within 20 minutes, stood on the bridge of the enemy flagship. Commander was on his knees, all 4 arms raised in surrender. His pale face was gray with shock. "This is impossible," whispered. "You are primitive savages, you cannot." "We survived a death world," said quietly. "We are the descendants of creatures that hunted and killed for millions of years. Did you really think 300 ships would stop us?" He activated his communicator. "Admiral, the enemy flagship is secured. Commander is in custody." Across the battlefield, the remaining hegemony vessels were surrendering or fleeing. Station 12 was safe. Its 3,000 residents were cheering and crying as human soldiers arrived to protect them. Admiral allowed himself a small smile. "Good work, Sergeant Major. Bring the commander to the Defiance. I think it's time the galaxy learned what humanity is truly capable of." In the cold silence of space, surrounded by the wreckage of what had been the hegemony's finest fleet, a new era was beginning. The humans were no longer servants. They were warriors, and they were just getting started. The Galactic Assembly met on a station called Unity Prime. It was the largest structure ever built, a sphere of crystal and metal floating in the heart of a peaceful star system. Representatives from over 800 species gathered there to decide the fate of civilizations. Ambassador O'Mara had served humanity in this place for 15 years. She was small and soft-spoken, with a gentle face that made aliens feel comfortable around her. This was intentional. Humans had learned long ago that their true nature frightened other species, so they had trained their diplomats to seem harmless. Today, Myra did not feel like being harmless. She walked through the great corridors of Unity Prime, past statues of ancient heroes and monuments to peace and cooperation. Other ambassadors saw her coming and moved aside. News of the battle at Station 12 had spread quickly. The humans had destroyed a hegemony fleet. The humans had captured a military commander. The humans had revealed a hidden armada that no one knew existed. For the first time in 3 centuries, the galaxy was afraid of Earth. The main assembly chamber was enormous, with seats rising in circles toward a distant ceiling. Myra's seat was near the bottom, in the section reserved for developing species. For years, she had accepted this insult without complaint. Not today. When she entered the chamber, she walked past her assigned seat and continued down to the central platform where only senior ambassadors were permitted. Guards moved to stop her, then hesitated. The look in her eyes made them step back. The Speaker of the Assembly was a crystalline being named Prime. He was not related to the defeated commander. They all shared similar names, but he felt the shame of his people's loss deeply. "Ambassador O," he said coldly, "you are out of place. Return to your seat." "No," Myra replied. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I will speak from here where everyone can see me." Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. No one spoke to the speaker this way. No developing species would dare. But humans were not a developing species anymore. "Your people have committed an act of war," Prime declared. "You attacked a lawful hegemony fleet. You killed soldiers who were performing their duty. We defended ourselves." Myra's voice cut through his speech like a blade. "Your lawful fleet was about to imprison 3,000 civilians, including children. Your duty was to lock our people in camps because you are afraid of us." The chamber fell silent. On the upper levels, ambassadors from hundreds of species leaned forward to listen. "Let me tell you about fear," Myra continued. "For 300 years we feared you. We feared your technology, your numbers, your control over every aspect of galactic life. We hid our strength because we did not want to frighten you. We accepted every insult, every restriction, every humiliation, because we believed that one day you would see us as equals." She paused and looked around the vast chamber. Alien eyes of every shape and color stared back at her. "We were wrong." Myra activated her personal display device. A massive holographic map appeared above her, showing human-controlled space. The ambassadors had seen this map before, a small cluster of systems near the edge of the galaxy. Unimportant, easily contained. But now new markers began to appear. Hidden shipyards, secret research stations, colonies that had never been reported, military bases buried inside asteroids and moons. The map grew and grew and grew. You thought you knew everything about us, Myra said. You thought your spies and sensors saw all of human space, but we learned to hide from predators long before we learned to walk upright. We have been building for 300 years, preparing for the day when you would finally show your true nature. An ambassador stood up angrily. This is a threat. You are threatening the entire assembly. No, Myra shook her head. I am offering you a choice, the only choice you will receive. She touched her display again. The map changed, showing fleet movements and battle reports from the past week. Station 12. The Nexus Prime Outpost. 3 border stations that had tried to block human ships. All of them were now under human control. You can continue this war, Myra said. You can gather your fleets and send them against us. Perhaps you will even win, but you have seen how we fight. You have seen what we are willing to do. Ask yourselves, how many of your people will die before it ends? How many of your worlds will burn? How much of your precious civilization will remain? She let the questions hang in the air. Or, she continued, you can choose peace. Real peace, not the false peace where you treat us like animals. Recognize humanity as equals. Return our impounded vessels. Release our people from your holding facilities, and accept that you can no longer control us. Prime's crystalline form flickered with barely contained anger. You are in no position to make demands. The combined fleets of the hegemony are already gathering, Myra interrupted. Yes, we know. 47 species have agreed to contribute ships to your alliance. It will be the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. She smiled, and for the first time, the ambassadors saw something in her eyes that they had never noticed before. Something cold and patient and dangerous. We are counting on it. The assembly erupted into chaos. Species that had been enemies suddenly found common ground. They all wanted humanity destroyed. Demands were shouted, threats were made, alliances were formed and broken in the space of minutes. Through it all, Myra stood calmly on the central platform. She had delivered her message. She had given them their chance. When she finally left the chamber, she passed Ambassador from Earth's military council. He was waiting in the corridor, his face grim. They will attack, he said quietly, every ship they have. Myra nodded, I know. Are we ready? She thought about the hidden fleets, the secret weapons, the plans that had been passed down through generations. She thought about Earth, that beautiful, violent, impossible world, and all the billions of humans who had never stopped fighting to survive. We have always been ready, she said. We were just waiting for them to understand what that means. Behind them, the assembly continued to rage. Orders were sent, fleets were mobilized, and the greatest war in galactic history began to take shape. The humans did not seem worried at all. General had been preparing for this day his entire life. His father had prepared for it. His grandfather had prepared for it. For 5 generations, the family had led humanity's secret military program, training soldiers and building weapons for a war they hoped would never come. Now it was here. He stood in the command center of Luna Base, humanity's primary military headquarters hidden beneath the surface of Earth's moon. Around him, hundreds of officers worked at their stations, tracking the massive hegemony fleet that was approaching the Sol system. Final count, he asked Colonel Shin, his tactical advisor. 47 species have contributed ships, she replied, studying her display. Total fleet strength is approximately 18,000 vessels. They outnumber us 15 to 1. Firepower comparison. Their combined weapons capacity is roughly 22 times greater than ours. Nodded calmly. The numbers were terrifying. Any reasonable species would surrender immediately. Any civilized culture would accept defeat rather than face such overwhelming odds. But humans were not reasonable, and they had never been truly civilized. What about their ground forces? He asked. They have assembled landing armies from 30 species. Total strength is estimated at 40 million soldiers, ready to deploy once they achieve orbital control. 40 million. It sounded like an unstoppable tide, but remembered something his grandmother had told him as a child. Numbers mean nothing if you don't know how to fight. The hegemony species had not fought a real war in centuries. They practiced military exercises, they simulated battles, they trained according to ancient doctrines. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules. "Begin Phase 1, ordered. Let them enter the system, let them think they are winning." The hegemony fleet arrived at the edge of Sol system in perfect formation. Thousands of ships, representing the finest technology of 47 worlds, spread out in patterns designed to maximize firepower and minimize risk. Their commanders communicated with each other through secure channels, coordinating their advance with mathematical precision. Admiral Prime led the combined fleet from his new flagship, the Absolute Victory. He had been given command of this operation personally, a chance to redeem his species after the humiliation at Station 12. "The humans are not engaging," reported his tactical officer. "Their fleet is holding position near the fourth planet." "Mars," Prime said, studying his display. "They are using it as a defensive position, predictable." He ordered the fleet to advance. The human ships fell back, moving toward Earth. It looked like a retreat. It looked like fear. It was neither. As the hegemony fleet passed Mars, the planet suddenly came alive. Hidden weapons platforms rose from beneath the rusty surface. Defense satellites that had been disguised as natural debris revealed themselves and opened fire. The outer ships of the hegemony formation were hit first. Energy beams and projectile weapons tore through their shields before they could react. Dozens of vessels exploded in the first minute. "It's a trap," Prime screamed. "All ships evasive action." But there was no room to evade. The hegemony fleet was packed together, designed for overwhelming assault, not defensive maneuvering. Ships collided with each other trying to avoid the Martian weapons. Others were caught in crossfire from their own allies. And then the human fleet turned around and attacked. Commander Bay led the assault once again. Her pilots had been waiting for this moment, hiding behind Mars while the enemy fleet moved past. Now they struck from behind, targeting command ships and communication vessels. "Focus on their coordination network," she ordered. "Blind them first, then kill them." The hegemony relied heavily on centralized command. Their ships received orders from flagships, which received orders from sector commanders, which received orders from fleet admirals. It was organized and efficient. It was also incredibly vulnerable. As human fighters destroyed communication relays and command vessels, the hegemony fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had been acting as a unified force suddenly found themselves alone, unable to receive orders or coordinate with allies. Some continued attacking. Some tried to retreat. Some simply stopped, their crews paralyzed by indecision. On Luna Base, General watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "Begin Phase 2, he said, "ground defense." Despite their losses in space, the hegemony still managed to land troops on Mars and Earth. They had practiced landing operations for centuries. They knew exactly how to establish beachheads and advance on enemy positions. What they did not know was how to fight on a death world. The soldiers who landed on Mars found themselves struggling to move. The gravity was lower than their home worlds, which should have been an advantage, but the hegemony training did not include low-gravity combat. They stumbled and fell while human defenders, born and raised on Mars, moved like ghosts through the red dust. The soldiers who landed on Earth faced the opposite problem. Earth's gravity was crushing compared to their gentle home worlds. Every step was exhausting. Their armor, designed for civilized warfare, was too heavy. Their weapons, optimized for accuracy, were impossible to aim steadily. And then there was the air, the water, the weather. A landing force in Southeast Asia was caught in a monsoon storm. Rain fell so heavily that their sensors went blind. Lightning struck their metal equipment. Within hours, they were begging for extraction. A combined force of 3 species attempted to establish a base in Siberia. The temperature dropped to levels that their heating systems could not handle. Their vehicles stopped working. Their soldiers began to freeze. Human defenders, wearing simple cold-weather gear, walked among them like spirits of winter, taking prisoners at will. Sergeant Major Han led the defense of Seoul. Street by street, building by building, his forces pushed back against an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. The hegemony soldiers could not understand how humans kept fighting after taking wounds that should have killed them. They could not comprehend humans who laughed in the face of danger, who charged into certain death, who refused to surrender even when all hope seemed lost. "This is madness," a captured alien commander told. "You are dying by the thousands. Why do you not surrender?" Looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death to be frightened anymore. "Because this is our home," he said simply, "and you are not welcome here." The battle for Sol System lasted 11 days. When it ended, the greatest military force in galactic history had been broken. Over 12,000 hegemony ships were destroyed or captured. Millions of soldiers were dead or surrendered. The survivors fled back to their own worlds, carrying stories of human savagery that would become legends. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral received the final surrender from Prime. The crystalline alien looked shattered, not physically but spiritually. "How," Prime whispered, "how did you defeat us?" Considered the question carefully. "You spent 300 years trying to make us into something we are not," he said finally. "You wanted us to be peaceful, civilized, tame. But you cannot tame a death world, Admiral. You can only survive it." He looked out at the stars, the same stars that had seemed so cold just weeks ago. Now they looked different. Now they looked like possibilities. "We survived Earth," said. "Surviving you was easy." 6 months after the war ended, Unity Prime looked different. The Great Assembly Station still floated in its peaceful star system, but the atmosphere inside had changed completely. Species that had once strutted through the corridors with arrogance now walked carefully, their eyes watching for human faces. Ambassador O'Meara noticed this change every day. She remembered how aliens used to look past her as if she did not exist. Now they made way when she approached. Some even bowed. She did not enjoy it as much as she thought she would. Today was the signing ceremony for the Treaty of Earth. Representatives from all 800 member species of the Galactic Assembly would witness the agreement that would reshape galactic civilization. It was, without question, the most important diplomatic event in history. Myra stood in her quarters preparing for the ceremony. Her formal uniform was simple but elegant, black with silver trim, the new colors of the Human Defense Force. On her chest, she wore only one decoration, a small earth pin that her grandmother had given her years ago. "You look worried," said a voice from the doorway. She turned to see Captain Park leaning against the frame. He was one of the war heroes now, famous for his actions during the defense of Earth. But he still had the same kind eyes she remembered from the early days of the conflict. "I am thinking about what comes next," Myra admitted. "We won the war, but winning peace is much harder." Nodded and walked into the room. "I spoke with Admiral this morning. He said the same thing. We proved we could fight. Now we have to prove we can lead." "Can we?" Myra asked softly. "For 300 years we learned to survive by hiding our true nature. Now the galaxy has seen what we really are. They saw us kill millions of their soldiers. They saw us destroy their fleets. How do they trust us after that?" Was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Maybe they don't need to trust us. Maybe they need to trust themselves." Myra frowned. "What do you mean?" "The hegemony controlled the galaxy through fear," explained. "Not fear of humans, fear of each other. Every species was taught that they were alone, that the only protection came from following hegemony rules. We broke that system. Now every species has to decide for themselves what kind of galaxy they want. It was a simple idea, but Myra realized it was also profound. Humanity had not just defeated an enemy. They had opened a door. What happened next would depend on everyone, not just humans. The ceremony took place in the main assembly chamber. Every seat was filled. Thousands of aliens watched as Admiral walked to the central platform, carrying the treaty document. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The war had cost him much, friends, officers, part of his own soul. But his back was straight and his voice was strong as he began to read. This treaty establishes the following terms. First, the species known as humans shall be recognized as full and equal members of the galactic community, with all rights and responsibilities that status implies. There was no objection. 6 months ago, aliens would have screamed protests at those words. Now they simply listened. Second, all human vessels and property that were seized under Decree 774 shall be returned immediately. All humans held in detention facilities shall be released. Again, silence. These were the expected terms. The losers of a war always paid such prices. But the next part was different. Third, continued, the human species pledges to extend its protection to any civilization that faces extinction, regardless of how that civilization has treated humanity in the past. We will use our strength not for conquest, but for preservation. A murmur ran through the assembly. This was not what they had expected. Conquerors demanded tribute and territory. They did not offer to protect their former enemies. General watched from the military section of the chamber. Beside him sat Colonel Shin and Sergeant Major Han, both still recovering from wounds they had received during the war. "You really believe this will work?" asked quietly, "protecting species that hate us?" Nodded slowly. "It is the only thing that will work. If we rule through fear, we become what we fought against. But if we lead through example, through protection, through genuine care for others, that is how we truly win." Said nothing. He had killed too many aliens during the war to feel comfortable with ideas of protection and care. But he respected its wisdom, so he remained silent. On the platform was finishing the treaty reading. Finally, this document establishes a new galactic council to replace the former hegemony assembly. All species shall have equal voice. All decisions shall be made by agreement, not by force. And any species that attempts to dominate or oppress others shall face the united resistance of all council members, including humanity. He set down the document and looked out at the assembled aliens. 800 species, from every corner of the galaxy. Most of them had wanted humanity destroyed just 6 months ago. Now they were being asked to join with humans in building something new. "I know many of you are afraid," said. "You have seen what we can do in war. You have heard stories about our violence, our savagery, our refusal to surrender. These stories are true. We are dangerous. We will always be dangerous." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "But we are also more than our wars. For every battle we fought on Earth, we also built cities and created art and raised families. For every act of violence in our history, there are 1,000 acts of kindness, of sacrifice, of love. We are a contradiction, capable of terrible destruction and beautiful creation. Today, we choose creation. We choose to use our strength to protect rather than conquer. We choose to offer friendship to those who were our enemies. We choose hope." He picked up a writing instrument and signed the treaty. "Who will choose with us?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the first alien ambassador rose from her seat and walked to the platform. She was from a small species that had suffered greatly during the hegemony's rule. Her people had been among the first to surrender to human forces during the war. She signed the treaty without a word, then looked at with eyes that held no fear. One by one, Other ambassadors followed. Species that had fought against humanity. Species that had called humans savages and animals. Species that had tried to destroy Earth itself. They came to the platform and signed, adding their names to a new future. Ambassador O'Meara signed for humanity's diplomatic corps. Commander Bay signed for the fighter pilots who had broken the hegemony's fleet. Captain Park signed for the countless crew members who had kept the human ships running through impossible battles. When the ceremony finally ended, over 700 species had joined the new council. It was not unanimous. Some would never forgive or trust humanity, but it was a beginning. Myra found herself standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. She had worked her entire life for this moment. Humanity was finally free, finally equal, finally respected. So why did she still feel uneasy? "Because the work is just beginning," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Admiral approaching. He moved slowly, like a man carrying a heavy weight. "We showed the galaxy we could fight," he said, standing beside her. "Now we have to show them we can be trusted. That will take much longer than any war." Myra nodded. "Do you think we can do it?" Was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled, a small, tired smile, but genuine. "We survived a death world," he said. "We survived 300 years of oppression. We survived the greatest war in galactic history. If any species can build a new future from the ruins of the old, it is humanity." He turned and walked away, leaving Myra alone with the stars. She stayed there for hours, watching the ships of 100 species moving through the darkness. Somewhere out there, former enemies were traveling home to begin rebuilding. Somewhere out there, humans were taking their place as equals in a galaxy that had tried to destroy them. The universe was vast and cold and dangerous. It would never be truly safe. But tonight, for the first time in 300 years, it felt like home. The humans had finally arrived, and they intended to stay.